License, registration, and proof of insurance. Why were you turning wide back there?
My documents are in my jacket and glove box. I reach slowly. May I ask the reason for the stop?
We've had high-end vehicle thefts. Is this your car? Step out of the...
The rain had just stopped, leaving the asphalt of downtown Chicago slick and reflective under the amber glow of the streetlights. It was past midnight, that quiet hour when the city's frantic energy settles into a low, steady hum. Marcus Vance gripped the leather steering wheel of his midnight blue Rolls-Royce Phantom, the faint purr of the V12 engine barely registering in the soundproofed cabin. At 52, Marcus carried the quiet exhaustion of a man who had spent the last 14 hours in boardrooms and financial audits. He was wearing a tailored charcoal suit, the tie long discarded on the passenger seat, his mind already shifting toward the hot shower and the expansive penthouse suite waiting for him at the top of the Grand Oak Haven, the flagship property of the luxury hotel empire he had built from the ground up over 2 decades. He signaled a right turn, the massive grille of the Phantom sweeping smoothly toward the hotel's private, illuminated cobblestone driveway. As the vehicle's tires met the stone, the interior of the car was suddenly bathed in a violent, strobing wash of red and blue light. Marcus glanced in his rearview mirror. A patrol cruiser had aggressively swung out from a side street, its siren giving a brief, sharp yelp before settling into a silent light show. Marcus felt a familiar leaden knot tighten in his stomach. It was a physical reaction, a survival instinct honed over a lifetime, an involuntary tightening of the jaw and a sudden sharp focus of the mind. He checked his speedometer out of habit, though he knew he had been gliding along at a leisurely 25 miles per hour. He hadn't drifted out of his lane. He hadn't run a yellow light. He slowly brought the heavy car to a halt right at the edge of the hotel's valet zone, shifting into park. He didn't reach for his glove compartment. He didn't unbuckle his seatbelt. He simply rolled down all 4 windows, turned on the interior dome light, and placed both of his hands high on the steering wheel, his fingers resting at the 10 and 2 positions. Through the side mirror, he watched the driver's side door of the cruiser open. Officer Miller stepped out, adjusting his duty belt. He was a younger officer, perhaps in his late 20s, his posture rigid, his hand resting casually but purposefully near the butt of his service weapon. Behind him, a second officer, a rookie named Davis, emerged from the passenger side, hanging back near the rear quarter panel of the Rolls-Royce, his flashlight beam already scanning the dark-tinted windows of the back seat. The tension in the air was immediate, thick with unspoken assumptions. Miller approached the driver's side window, his flashlight unnecessarily bright as he shined it directly into Marcus's eyes before sweeping it across the pristine leather interior, lingering on the discarded silk tie and the expensive watch on Marcus's left wrist. Marcus squinted, keeping his hands perfectly still. He breathed in slowly, forcing his heart rate to remain steady. "Evening," Officer Miller said, his tone flat, carrying that specific cadence of practiced authority that bordered on an accusation. License, registration, and proof of insurance. Marcus did not immediately move his hands. "Good evening, officer," he replied, his voice a low, calm baritone. "My wallet is in my inside left jacket pocket, and the registration is in the glove compartment. With your permission, I am going to reach for them now." Miller's jaw tightened slightly. He seemed thrown off by the absolute precision of the response. "Go ahead. Keep it slow." As Marcus carefully moved his right hand toward his chest, he maintained eye contact with the officer. "May I ask why I was pulled over this evening?" Miller didn't answer immediately. He watched Marcus extract the leather wallet, his flashlight beam tracking the movement. "I asked for your license and registration, sir. We'll get to the rest in a minute." "I am complying with your request," Marcus said smoothly, handing the cards through the window. "But I am also inquiring about the nature of this stop. I was not speeding, my tags are current, and I signaled my turn." Miller took the cards, shining his light onto the driver's license. He looked at the name, Marcus Vance, then looked back at the man in the car, his eyes darting toward the illuminated spirit of ecstasy ornament on the hood. The assumption was practically radiating off the officer in waves. A black man, alone, late at night in a $500,000 vehicle, pulling into the private driveway of one of the city's most exclusive hotels. To Miller, the math didn't add up. It was an equation built on a foundation of implicit bias, an ingrained suspicion that wealth in certain hands required an explanation. "You made a wide turn back at the intersection," Miller stated, handing the license to his partner over his shoulder without looking away from Marcus. "Crossed the solid white line. Plus your windows are tinted pretty dark. We've had a rash of vehicle thefts in this district lately, high-end cars." Marcus felt a cold anger flare in his chest, but he kept his expression entirely neutral. He knew the law. He knew the precise choreography of a traffic stop, and he knew when an officer was fishing. A wide turn was a pretext. The mention of stolen vehicles was the true motive. My windows are factory standard, well within the legal limit for this state, Marcus replied evenly, and I did not cross the solid white line. However, even if I had, a minor traffic infraction does not warrant an investigation into grand theft auto without reasonable articulable suspicion. Miller leaned in slightly, resting his forearm on the roof of the car, closing the physical distance in a classic intimidation tactic. Are you a lawyer, Mr. Vance? No, officer. I am simply a citizen who is acutely aware of the Fourth Amendment, Marcus said, his voice dropping a fraction of an octave. You initiated a Terry stop. For that, you need a reasonable suspicion that a crime has been, is being, or is about to be committed. A wide turn, which I dispute, is a civil infraction, not a felony. Therefore, unless you are writing me a citation for an improper turn, this stop is being unlawfully extended. The legal precision hit Miller like a physical blow. The officer's posture stiffened, his ego immediately bruised by a civilian challenging his authority with undeniable accuracy. In the realm of law enforcement, an officer's control of the scene is paramount. When that control is intellectually challenged, the instinct is often to physically escalate to regain dominance. Miller's eyes narrowed. Is this your vehicle, sir? Yes, Marcus answered. I noticed the address on your license is in a different zip code, Miller pressed, trying to find a crack in the armor. What brings you to the Grand Oak Haven at 1 a.m? You got a room here? I am here for work, Marcus replied, keeping his answers concise. Miller let out a short, humorless scoff. Work, at 1 a.m. in a Phantom. Right, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle, Mr. Vance. This was the pivot point. This was the moment where procedural errors morphed into constitutional violations. Marcus did not move. His hands remained firmly on the steering wheel. Officer, I am declining your request. You do not have probable cause to search my vehicle, nor do you have reasonable suspicion to ask me to exit it. I pose no physical threat to you. My hands have been visible the entire time, and I have provided my identification under Pennsylvania versus... Mims, you can order me out of the car for officer safety, but considering we are parked in a well-lit hotel driveway and I have been entirely cooperative, ordering me out to facilitate an unlawful investigation is a violation of my rights. Miller unclipped the retaining strap on his holster. It was a subtle click, but in the quiet of the night, it sounded like a gunshot. The rookie, Davis, shifted nervously in the background, shining his light down at the pavement. I'm not asking you again, sir. Step out of the vehicle. Marcus looked at the officer's hand hovering over the gun. He knew the statistics. He knew that being right and being dead were not mutually exclusive. He took a slow breath, preparing to unbuckle his seatbelt to comply under duress, when a sharp, authoritative voice echoed from the glass doors of the hotel lobby. Is there a problem out here? Both officers turned. Striding out from beneath the grand awning was David, the hotel's night manager, flanked by 2 valet attendants in crisp uniforms. David, a tall man in a pristine 3-piece suit, looked bewildered, his eyes darting from the flashing police lights to the Phantom, and finally to the man sitting in the driver's seat. Stay back, sir. This is an active traffic stop, Miller barked, raising his hand. David didn't stop. He walked directly up to the edge of the driveway, his expression shifting from confusion to profound alarm. He looked past the officer, peering into the window. Mr. Vance? Sir, is everything all right? Do you need me to call the legal team? Miller paused, glancing between the night manager and the man in the car. You know this individual. David looked at the officer as if he had just asked if water was wet. Know him? Officer, this is Marcus Vance. He is the CEO and founder of the Oak Haven Hospitality Group. He owns this hotel. He owns the ground you are currently standing on. Now I ask again, what on earth is going on here? The silence that followed was heavy, thick, and suffocating. The flashing red and blue lights suddenly seemed garish, completely out of place against the elegant backdrop of the luxury hotel. Officer Miller's hand slowly fell away from his holster. The arrogant certainty that had anchored his posture completely evaporated, replaced by a sudden, sickening realization of his profound miscalculation. He had profiled the driver. He had assumed that a black man in a Rolls-Royce could not possibly belong in this environment unless he was an athlete, an entertainer, or a criminal, and his actions had been entirely driven by the desire to prove his own biased assumption correct. Marcus finally moved his hands from the steering wheel. He unbuckled his seatbelt with a quiet click and opened the heavy door, stepping out onto the cobblestones. He smoothed the front of his suit jacket and stood up to his full height, looking directly into Officer Miller's eyes. There was no triumph in Marcus's expression, no smug satisfaction. There was only a bone-deep weariness. David, it's fine, Marcus said to the manager, his voice steady. The officer and I were just having a discussion about probable cause. He turned his attention back to Miller. Officer, you initiated a stop based on a fabricated traffic violation. You demanded I exit my vehicle without a shred of reasonable suspicion, attempting to manufacture a reason to search my property. You allowed your assumptions to override your training, and in doing so, you violated standard procedure and my constitutional rights. Miller swallowed hard, his face flushed. Sir, I was just doing my job. We have protocols. Your protocol is dictated by the law, not your personal intuition, Marcus interrupted, his tone sharp but controlled. Your intuition told you that I didn't belong in this car. Your intuition was wrong, and if I were a 20-year-old kid without the vocabulary or the confidence to challenge you, this interaction would have gone very differently, wouldn't it? The rookie, Davis, stepped forward slightly, handing Marcus his license and registration. Here are your cards, Mr. Vance. We apologize for the inconvenience. Have a good night. It was an attempt to salvage the situation, a desperate retreat. Marcus took the cards, sliding them back into his pocket. I need both of your names and badge numbers, now. They provided them, their voices devoid of the aggressive authority they had wielded just minutes prior. They retreated to their cruiser, the flashing lights finally clicking off, leaving the driveway bathed once again in the warm, ambient glow of the hotel. Marcus watched them pull away, merging quietly back into the city traffic, slipping into the night as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. There was no explosive screaming match, no immediate firing of the officer, no cinematic justice served right there on the cobblestones. The real world rarely works like that. What followed was a cold, bureaucratic process. The next morning, Marcus's legal team filed a formal, meticulously documented complaint with the precinct's Internal Affairs Division. They pulled the hotel's security footage, which clearly showed Marcus making a perfectly legal, slow turn into the driveway, directly contradicting Miller's stated reason for the stop. They subpoenaed the officer's dash cam and body cam audio. Officer Miller was not fired the next day. The wheels of institutional accountability grind notoriously slow, but he was pulled off patrol and placed on administrative desk duty pending a full investigation into his stop and frisk statistics and history of pretextual stops. A permanent stain was attached to his record, a glaring red flag regarding his judgment and adherence to the Fourth Amendment. The rookie, Davis, received a formal reprimand for failing to intervene when his partner escalated an unlawful stop. It was a tedious, unglamorous pursuit of accountability, handled entirely through paperwork, depositions, and union representatives. Months later, sitting in his expansive corner office overlooking the Chicago skyline, Marcus would look down at the streets below, watching the endless stream of headlights cutting through the dusk. He had won the battle. He had forced the system to acknowledge the procedural failure, but the victory felt hollow. Because Marcus knew that the true danger didn't lie in the overtly malicious cops. It lay in the officers like Miller, the ones who genuinely believed they were doing good police work, completely blind to the fact that their hunts were entirely directed by an ingrained subconscious bias. They weaponized the law, stretching the definitions of reasonable suspicion and probable cause to fit a narrative they had already written in their heads before they even turned on their sirens. It leaves us with a profound question to consider the next time we see flashing lights in the rearview mirror. If a man armed with wealth, status, and an encyclopedic knowledge of his constitutional rights can still find himself a fraction of a second away from a violent escalation simply because of the car he drives and the color of his skin, what hope does an ordinary citizen have? The law is meant to be a shield that protects the public evenly, but when the application of that law is distorted by assumption, it transforms into a weapon. And until we demand that those sworn to protect us dismantle their own internal biases, the line between a routine traffic stop and a tragedy will remain dangerously, unacceptably thin. Would you like me to help you explore more stories that examine the intersection of law, bias, and society?